So Clark has been called my father, and at one point someone called him my husband. I said, no, no,
Oh
no.
my God.
No, we won't go there. But he was kind of an uncle figure to me. My relationship with him, it was very, very close. When I didn't know him growing up.
Right.
And I met him, oh gosh, I was in junior college at PCC in Pasadena. And I'd heard about him for years. My father had already passed. I'd heard about Clark Terry. I took a jazz improvisation class, and the instructor talked about Clark. And I'm like, okay, I need to meet him. I need to know him. So I wrote him a letter, and I didn't hear an answer for several months. And then finally from Switzerland came this letter. Of course, Clark was on the road traveling. And a handwritten letter from Clark Terry, and to say how happy he was that I reached out to him to find him, and that we would one day meet. Well, he came to Los Angeles and played at the Parisian Room. I don't know if you remember that place. It's way before your time.
Before my time.
This little dive on, I believe it's La Brea and Washington.
Okay.
Old jazz players will know it.
Yeah,
Because
sure,
everybody
sure.
that came to town played there.
Right.
And Clark was playing there this night. So I went with a trombone boyfriend player of mine at the time. He surprised me, actually. I didn't know I was going to hear Clark.
Oh, wow.
So we went in and sat down, and I'm like, okay, I had never been to a jazz club before, and it was rather interesting.
That was your first experience
My first
in a jazz
experience,
club.
yeah.
Wow.
And then Clark walks out, and I was just... And so we're sitting in the front row, and Clark keeps looking down at me like, do I know you? Don't I know you? Don't I know you? And then finally, after he took a break, I went up to him and introduced myself. And from that point, he called me half dimps, because when I smile, I have half of a dimple, and just embraced me like he'd always known me. And so we made a really beautiful and powerful connection. And then I eventually moved to New York, and where he lived, near where he lived. And so Clark and I were together a lot. I travel with him. I just go over to the house. I just sit up under him and learn, and he was a taskmaster. I mean, the way he taught, it was always with love, but it was very, he didn't let you settle. He didn't let you get it. Right before you really had it down solid what he was trying to teach, he pushed you on to something else. And so I was always in this state of flux.
But he knew he was doing that.
It was very purposeful. Because he didn't want me to ever get comfortable, because I grew up as a classical player. European classical music I trained in that.
Right.
So I was accustomed to the page. I was accustomed to things being, written out, charted out. He wanted to give me a completely different experience, where you're thrown this idea or this set of circumstances. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to take it and mold it and shape it into something of your own? And have the flexibility to move in the way that you needed to move to get the job done.
Wow.
And it was a really brilliant way, and using your ear and using, watching him and just taking in what he was doing. It wasn't about getting it perfectly. It was about learning to have the ability to be flexible and go for it, like bam.
To be
because the magic,
playing on your feet, sort of.
That's right. The magic is in those moments. It's not necessarily in what you prepare. Just, even our conversation, the magic comes, the energy comes, the spirit comes in those moments, and learning to trust those moments.
That's so interesting. Amazing. I'm curious what those sessions were like. I mean, you playing with Clark Terry and maybe getting your butt kicked a little bit.
Totally.
What was
just constantly beat up. Constantly. He would do, because he was a brass player, he had exercises that related to the way you have to tongue and the way you have to phrase when you blow air through an instrument, which doesn't necessarily translate to a string instrument. It's a different approach
Yeah.
because it's a different action. I'm not using air, I'm using a bow. So I guess the bow then would become the air.
Sure.
So he devised a system called the doodle system. I don't know if you know about that.
I've seen him talk about it in an old video. Yeah.
I'm tempted to try it, but it's been a minute since I tried. Daddle, deedle, doddle, doodle, doodle. Daddle, deedle, doddle, doodle, doodle. Of course, Clark could do it 5 times faster than I can. But
Super
daddle.
fast.
But what it does is give you a sense of the way you ghost a note. Daddle. It's not daddle, doddle. No, it's daddle, deedle, doddle, doodle, doodle. And you put the accent in different places. So I had to learn how to transfer that to a bow.
Yeah.
I had to take that sound and transfer it to a bow in order to create a feeling of swing. Because that's what swing is. It's an intangible thing that lives in the moment. It's not something you can write down on a piece of paper. Even those words on a piece of paper fall short. You got to hear it to play it. So we would do these exercises where he'd go through the whole daddle system with my bow, and then he'd make up phrases that I'd play back. He would play something that I had to play it back. And I couldn't write it down. I had to hear it and then play it. And I was horrible at first. I mean, I was pitiful because I was trying really hard to be perfect, in the way I was accustomed. If you write it down, I can read it like, a mad woman. I can read it. But hear it and play it, I was really separated from that idea of how to grab information.
It's probably different parts of your brain, right? That you're accessing
Different parts
to do
of
that.
everything.
Yeah.
Because, in a technical sense, it calls on certain things that you learn to do, But when you hear it, you got to put all those things together at once. You have to synthesize it and then pull it back out again like that. There's no time to sit and think about it. So the best guide then becomes your ear. Not your eyes reading, but your ear. And great, great improvisers are ones that can do that. Boom, they hear it, they got it.
Yeah.
They find it, they know where it is. And I was just fascinated by that magical place that musicians reside, where they're hearing and bring it forth immediately, So, but in his eyes, Clark loved me, but I never felt like I even got close,
Oh, wow.
But I later learned, especially when I joined Uptown String Quartet and was working with Max, I heard reports from other people how proud he was.
Wow.
That I was in that group and we were doing the work that we were doing. So he never told me directly, but I heard, indirectly.
I think a lot of those guys of that generation, there was this kind of a tough love mentality where it's like, I'm not gonna nurture you up to the level that you want to be at and that we all want you to be at, with hugs and congratulations and constant updates of, oh wow, you've improved this much
Right.
in the last number of months. It's always kind of seems to be focusing your attention on, look, you just messed that up, look, you just messed that up. But it
what are
did
you
come
gonna
from a
do
place
with it?
of love, because
You messed it up, but what are you going to do with it?
right.
Do you leave it messed up? Or do you find a path out of it that isn't about mess up? It's about discovering yourself and discovering the beauty of what is there and cannot be seen. And I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's perfect.
Clark was a master at that, and that was what he brought to the educational arena as well. He taught that way. He said, no, jazz was not born in the academy, and that's true. Jazz was born in the streets. Jazz was born in life. Jazz was born in struggle. Jazz was born in the ability to overcome your circumstances. That's not the educational arena at all. It's scripted. It's according to someone else's opinion or design of what you need to be and what you need to become. And so he always taught from that perspective. Again, no mistakes, but rather more opportunities to create something magical. You take what is typically considered a mistake and you turn it into magic. And then it becomes yours and nobody can take it away from you. And I learned that in a really beautiful and powerful way as I went on with my educational career, especially when I got into the doctorate program, of where I felt very much like I had to adhere to a particular way of doing things. But what came to me very often, either in my own memory or with someone saying something, no, stay true to Lesa Terry. Who is Lesa Terry in the mix of this? What does Lesa Terry need to say or feel or express or discover? That's your greatest strength, is knowing yourself and not deviating from it at all. Now, you may need to improve, you may need to grow in expression, and add to your experience with other ways of doing things, but stay true to who you are. And Clark did that masterfully. You hear one note from Clark Terry, you know it was him. Of one phrase, one idea, even a laugh, that's Clark Terry.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say that. I mean, he's one of these artists, recording artists, for example, where, like you're saying, the first note, you're like, there's only one person this could be, right? And I don't know what orchestra or what group I'm listening to. I don't know who any of the other musicians or soloists are, but that sound, it has to be Clark Terry. And I don't know, to me, again, just as someone who has listened to his recordings and gotten a lot of joy out of them, his sound sounds so personal. I mean, listening to it, I almost feel like this is the guy's personality. Is that accurate? I mean...
Oh, absolutely. His sense of humor. Clark had jokes. My God. That, again, those were teachable moments as well, because when we laugh, there's a release of tension. When you laugh, you relax. You're able to then receive something else, a suggestion, an idea, or a way of putting it on your horn in a way as a coded message. Laughter, something that's funny, or something that even difficulty too. You develop this way of speaking on your horn, or your horn could be a violin too. It reminds me of what I used to do playing in Uptown String Quartet. There was this joke that's for women, and we had this joke that I really can't say on camera, but someone would gesture, and I can't even do the gesture, would gesture, and which meant it was a coded message for this certain thing that related to something that involves maybe what we experience emotionally. I'll say it like that.
Okay.
And we would all, and this would be in the middle of a concert. If one of us played a solo that was particularly good, one of us would do this gesture, and we'd all see it. We do it very discreetly.
Right.
But we just crack up, as we're playing, we're cracking up. But again, it created another feeling that was off the page. It was very much about the moment and what we were creating for an audience. And oftentimes audience members would comment on that. Well, what were y'all doing? What was that joke about? Oh, can't really tell you that. That's a coded kind of thing inside, but it speaks to our femininity, speaks to who we were as women within a context of men, generally speaking. It was many things, but most of all, it was empowering. Because no teacher in any college situation ever told us we could or could not do that. That's something that was created in the mix of what we were when we came together. And you know, very powerful thing. You know, very, very powerful thing. So um, it's all these things. And Clark used to do that all the time, all the time. His mumbles was a prime example of that, where he'd go, you had no idea what he was saying, but you knew everything that he was saying.
Yeah.
And to have an ability to speak in ways that were important, you know, to him, to an audience, and then bring them along on the journey as well. It was really powerful.
Because even when he was not speaking at all, I mean, his music definitely has this storytelling quality to it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You take an audience, or even yourself, on a journey. You know, you play a note, okay, what's the next note? Or what's the next phrase? Or what's the next way you're going to interject an idea or a thought? You know, you play the note again and you bend it, or you shape it in a particular way to give it a little color, a little finesse, or a little substance in a different way. That again speaks to the journey. You're walking down the street and you trip over a piece of pavement. Okay, you try to catch yourself. Well, you're not going to do that in an organized way. It's crazy,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Flailing.
But then you save yourself. You know, you don't fall all the way to the ground. It's not pretty going down, but you get up. You're able to get up and be okay with it. So even the journey in music, or in jazz music, is much the same. Something happens, there's a situation, then there's a reaction to it, and then some kind of resolution. May be good, may not be good, but it's moving. You know, it's moving on. And then you always have the choice to change directions, always have the opportunity to keep it going in a certain kind of way. So, and be well with what came in the moment. And then, you know, also strive to continually improve it, say it differently, find another way to speak a truth or a message, you know. So that to me is tremendously important, and keeps me on the path, you know. Say it another way, find another way to say it. You know, even in teaching, we do that, you know. I get really bored if I say the same thing too many times. The students get really, really bored, you know. So how can you say it differently, or what can you do to get their attention in a way that shakes them up, or allows them to think, oh, she's a hip old broad, you know, she's not so stiff and um, without the ability to, you know, laugh at herself, you know. And again, the laughter again is a release of tension, you know. And when we're in that place, I think we can be open to so much more, to just so much good and inspiration of the life force, which, you know, I must say is all around me right now, and I'm digging it because they are also part of that life force.
Yeah.
And as the music comes together with those things, it creates a really beautiful place of inspiration.
So actually, I have so many questions about your musical philosophy that I'm tempted to dive into right now, but I want to ask you a couple more questions about Clark before I do that. One of which is this. I mean, when you listen back to old interviews with Clark Terry, you know, before it was considered like cool to talk about this stuff, he was very explicit about the really horrific racism and racist violence that he had experienced, especially as a young person. And it's unimaginable to me, I mean, what it must have been like for him to grow up in grinding poverty in an environment where he's surrounded by pretty vicious racism, and then through basically his genius and his work on his horn to work his way to a station in life where, you know, he's playing on late night TV, you know, basically a national celebrity. And no doubt, I mean, the racism, I'm sure, followed him there too. But this is somebody who experienced such a wide spectrum of things in life. Do you have any idea what it was all like for him? I don't know if he ever talked about that kind of stuff with you.
Well, I know that he experienced it and he felt it very deeply, but the beauty of Clark Terry for me is his ability to overcome it.
Mm.
And he would overcome it not only with his horn, but in the way he greeted people, in the way he welcomed people into his world. He'd come off the stage sometimes exhausted. I mean, even toward the end of his life when he was really suffering with the diabetes.
Mm.
Tired, exhausted, hurting, in pain. But anybody that came up to him, he would take the time to welcome them, to say thank you for coming, to ingratiate himself in a way that helped them to feel welcomed into his world. And I just, you know, to me that is so amazing because I know what it's like to come off the stage, you're tired and you don't necessarily want to say hello, how you doing, and smile and be all that. Every time Clark was.
Wow.
I never saw him be sort of disagreeable. I mean, at home, okay, but not when he was on stage or just off stage. He took the time. And so to me, that was his way of moving past the difficulty that he experienced as a Black man. You know, he couldn't change it, but he found a clever way to put it on his horn and be able to talk about people like a dog through his mumbles.
Oh, wow.
So that was his expression.
Wow.
And again, for those that understood it and understood the coding, they knew exactly what it would say. He could call you a dirty
Yeah.
in a New York minute, and you knew just with the inflection on his horn
Right.
what he was doing.
Yeah.
Okay?
Wow.
And that was the way he did it. But he did it, he was from the generation too of graciousness. You know, in the face of adversity, he was always gracious. He was always a gentleman. He was always, and others like in Max Roach was the same way. Privately, it was a different story.
Sure.
But on stage, it was this elegance, and that was a part of the Black experience too. You always held yourself in this place of grace and beauty.
Projecting excellence.
Yes. You don't succumb to the stupidity that may be around you. You know, Maya Angelou's another one, a great influence on me. Same thing, this air of elegance and grace, strength, because you had to be.
Yeah.
Because if you gave it up for a second, then they win.
Yeah. Yeah.
They win. And it's hard for me to recognize that in today's world. I think we've let go of it a little bit. And it's just changed so significantly. The way you dress, the way Clark would dress, Lord have mercy. His shoes, his socks, the way he coordinated, again, was another expression of artistry.
Yeah.
You know? And I know it was specific to that time period. But you didn't step out in torn up jeans.
Yeah.
I know it's a thing for today, and it's cool, and I get it. It's counter, you know, a counter to the establishment. I get all of that.
Right.
But I also say it was a beautiful thing to see a man dress so elegantly when he was held in some people's mind to being enslaved or domestic or whatever it might be. No, these were elegant, well-dressed, educated men.
Yeah, you couldn't be more elegant. I mean,
And to put that kind of magic on an instrument, Lord have mercy, improvisationally, in the moment, not something written down. In the moment, you're coming up with it, just like this.
right.
But it speaks to the culture, too, because that's what they lived. A situation would happen, you had to come up with a solution immediately.
Wow.
So it comes right out of the culture. That's why you can't learn this in school. It's why, to me, jazz programs in colleges don't work. because you're not getting that real accessibility to the tools that are necessary to craft what you need to craft on the stage. It's
You're removed a little bit from the source of the music.
exactly. So, of course, you know, colleges and universities don't want to necessarily hear that.
But it's true.
Because those that teach typically are ones that are there that are not necessarily on the road. Not necessarily, some are. But it's a real divide, you know, and I think both are useful, but we have to understand the context in order to be able to do what we need to do. So.
And that this isn't a substitute for that.
Right. You don't go to school to learn how to be a good jazz musician.
Yeah.
You go to school, yes, that's good, that's great, that's fine. But you got to be in the trenches, doing it night after night, playing it, taking the risk, going out there, falling on your face, getting back up, trying it again, to really, really, really get it and understand what that's about. You know, so I don't know if I answered your question.
No, that was a very good answer. Last question about Clark. You and your twin sister Mona were working on this lovely project where you put together a children's book about the life of Clark. I wonder if you could talk just a little bit about that project.
Well, yes. The book idea came actually from Clark's wife, Gwen Terry, who had already written a book about Clark. And she felt that a children's book needed to be written and said, okay, would you all do it? And Mona and I are, you know, not authors at all, but we said, okay. And this was when Clark was quite ill. He was in bed and, you know, near the end of his life. And so we went to the back bedroom and said, okay, Clark, what do you think? What do you think of this idea? Do you have an idea for a title? He said, yes, of course he did. He said, how about Hark, It's Clark?
Wow.
Said,
That
absolutely.
sounds on brand, yeah.
Okay. And then we added The Extraordinary Adventures of C.T. and His Horn. C.T. was his nickname.
Right.
And so, you know, it was just like learning to play jazz, that process of learning how to write about Clark Terry as a boy and taking an adventure that he might have experienced and creating a story around it. So that's what the book became. I think it's 7 chapters.
Wow.
With music that we still plan to put out. We finished the book, but some obstacles to overcome. You know.
Publishing is a killer.
So it's a story about Clark's first trumpet and how he, what he went through to find his first trumpet. And all the difficulties with that. You know, again, we situated it in St. Louis where he grew up and what he might have had or would not have. But his quest for that trumpet was greater than anything he couldn't have because of his situation. And in the end, he gets exactly what he wants. So the idea is to teach young children about the ability to hold on to a dream no matter what, and to go after it no matter what comes your way. Keep striving, keep reaching for it because it will come. You know, maybe not in the way you thought, you know, originally, but it will present itself to you. So we're really excited about the book. It's all in rhyme. We thought because it's a story about a musician, the rhyme would make sense. And then accompanying music for each chapter that helps to tell the story.
Wow.
So it just opened up this whole new avenue for Mona and I creatively. And we had a lot of fun. There were a lot of moments like, you know, where we would just laugh and feel Clark's presence, you know, in the midst of it, helping to push us along the way. And those moments again when Clark was screaming at me, you know, I understood them, what he was preparing me for, to reach deeper inside myself and find something, you know, along with Mona that would take us to the world of being authors of children's books. So, and the expanded nature of creativity. Yes, I'm a violinist, but it doesn't have to stop there. For
Right.
truly creative artists, we can embrace many aspects of what that is, you know, as Clark did as well. you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, so
It's
stay
amazing.
tuned.
Yeah.
It's coming. It's coming. Yeah.
And it must have been so wild to, I mean, it would be for me to think about someone who's always been in your life as an elder, as someone who's a full generation up from you, and then envision them as a child and write this story about them as a child. Was that?
Well, you know, so much of Clark's story, you know, just personally with me, was he always had a chuckle and a grin. That's even a line in the book, with a chuckle and a grin. Always. He would do this funny little chuckle that he felt like a child, you know, it was with this childlike spirit. So even though he, you know, was in his 90s as we're writing this book, I still felt his spirit as a young man, you know, and a youthfulness, I'll say it that way.
Wow.
And in the way that he did things, in the way that he saw life.
Wow.
You know, he wasn't a stodgy old curmudgeon at all. He was full of life, even laying in the bed, you know, unable to move. There was a spirit there that just continued.
Wow.
Just continued on. So, and a lesson for all of us: get up, go do your stuff. You know, go do
Right.
what you were called to do. Don't lay down. Don't, you know, succumb to age or other kinds of limitations that knock us down. Get up and do it. You know. So, thank you, Clark. Thank you.